Our beliefs are thoughts that we continue to think over and over again until they stick, right? So these beliefs about ourselves can really help us identify our self-concept. So you might have a belief like I'm smart or I'm not good enough, and that can shape your self-concept. I think about the fact like when I was little, my grandparents were like my hype squad. Like they were literally like, you are so smart, like you're gonna be successful, and like truly hyped me up. So I didn't have space in my life to think that there was anything less than me being smart, right? So when I didn't do well in like school, like, and which was very rare, but if I didn't like do great on a test, I didn't start thinking like I'm dumb. I was just like, something's wrong, I have to fix it because I'm smart and I know the answers and I can figure it out. And so they helped shape that self-concept because they helped me believe that I was smart. Hi, and welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast, episode number 107. So today in the podcast, I want to talk about a concept that I kind of mentioned casually on here, and I wanted to go a little deeper to give you a better understanding of what your self-concept actually is. So what I want to really dig into is, what is your self-concept? How do you understand your self-concept? And the concept of self-sabotage and how to overcome self-sabotage. So a lot of the material that I have found on this topic really talks about like self-concept in terms of like leaders in the workplace and employee self-concept. And I really wanted to create this podcast specifically as your self-concept as a working mom, your self-concept as a mom, a wife, a friend, and that encompasses everything that you are and who you are. So we're going to first dive into a few definitions. And as we talk about this, I just want you to kind of just keep an open mind and use this to have some self-compassion and not judge yourself. Think about like what your potential is and what you think your potential is, and maybe some areas that you could improve on or change. Hey mama, you deserve a life free of overwhelm and burnout. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. I'm your host, life and mindset coach, Shiro Bergbauer. I'm also a wife, mom, and CRNA. This is the podcast for high-achieving mamas in medicine like you and I. Together, we'll learn how to navigate the ups and downs of working motherhood. If you're looking to thrive in your relationships and overcome overwhelm in your motherhood, marriage, and medicine, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. What is self-concept? So self-concept is the beliefs, perceptions, and attitude that you have about yourself. So it includes how you see yourself, your personality, your abilities, your values, and your overall self-image. It is formed and shaped by our experiences in the world, our relationships, our cultural backgrounds, and social interactions. So I'll give you an example for myself. Like when I think about my self-concept, for me, there was the life in my country of birth where I lived until I was 18 years old. Actually, I turned 18 a month after I moved to the US. So that self-concept is, as a daughter, a sister, a cousin, a friend, a student, right? Most of my elementary school and middle and high school, all of it, my foundational learning was in my country of birth. So that background. And then my cultural background, right? I, as a woman, an African woman of Kenyan descent, the languages that I speak, the way I interact with people, all of that is like the foundation of my self-concept. Then I moved to the US and I had experiences in my, late teens, early 20s that also shaped who I became. The relationships I was in, the people I dated, the friends I made, all of that, and how I showed up in the world. And then there's also my mid-20s, which were my grad school years, and towards my late 20s, my grad school years, really getting to know myself, meeting my now husband, getting to work on a lot of past conditioning, past trauma. My 30s came, all of that, just identifying my self-concept. And then now, as I get closer to turning 40, I can see how my self concept has evolved. And I was thinking about this the other day because a conversation came up and I kind of felt a little triggered by that conversation. And I was sharing this with my therapist. And what I thought about after my conversation with my therapist is that, so just a little context. I used to love having the tea, like knowing what is happening in the world around me and like who's doing what, almost like TMZ news, like workplace edition or like life edition. Like I love to have tea. And another thing about me is I like to investigate things which probably are not like even worth investigating. So a lot of minutia collected in my brain. So anyway, I was thinking about this because somebody asked me a question recently and I literally had no desire to know more about like the scenario. I was just like, in my mind, I'm like, I really like just have too much going on in my head that I don't want to know. I really don't. And like, I kind of had a moment where I sat back and I was like, I feel like that used to like excite me, like to know what's going on and who did what and like what happened where and they said what and then they did this and then this crazy thing happened. And I started to realize that over, especially the last year and a half, my self concept, as far as like just wanting to know information or being the giver of information or the transmitter of information, has changed a lot. And going back to unpacking all of that was the realization that part of the reason why I actually enjoyed that is because it was a distraction from my own work that I need to be doing in my life. And so, of course, it's easier to like gossip, or of course, it's easier to like want to know what's happening in the world around me, outside of me. And just realizing, like, as I got older and I had done a lot of inner work, that it just wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it to be the person. And also just have awareness of like what those conversations actually cause in the long run is that things get taken out of translation, things get said in those conversations, and somebody will receive some portion of that information, translated however, or even as directly as it was given, and experience hurt in their life. And so it's not benign to like want to have all the tea and be the person that tells the stories and has all the things. So all this to say, when I had awareness of what like self-concept is and why even our self-concept is the way it is, I had a better understanding of why I felt driven to change my self concept and why those experiences had shaped my previous self concept were also important in my future, right? But I wasn't kind of bringing those tools with me along the way. Like I wasn't going to bring that with me to the future. And so, like I said, our experiences, our relationship, our cultural backgrounds, and social interactions play a huge, huge role in our self concept. Another example I was thinking about is like, all my life, I was always told I was clumsy, and I have evidence of it, right? And I was recently listening to something, and I realized that, like, my self concept, if something like clumsy happened adjacent, I'd just be like, oh, that's just how I am. And as I have shifted to understand, like, my awareness of my proprioception and my hand eye coordination and how I do things, first, I didn't even make it a big deal anymore that I had clumsy habits. I was just like, I just have to be more intentional about like where my hands and my legs and my body are moving in space to have clarity. So, how do you identify your self concept? So, I'm going to give you some pointers to how 5 ways in which we identify our self concept, and of course this is not an exhaustive list. So the first way is reflection and introspection. So if you take the time to reflect on your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, you can really get some insight about who you are and what your concept of yourself is. So, and you can do this by journaling, meditation, or just simply taking time each day just to like do a thought download, which is just writing down what thoughts are flowing in your mind to think about yourself and the experiences you've had. And another way to even get that self concept is like when you're working with a therapist or a coach to just be able to like verbalize those things. So one of the ways in which I was able to really, really understand what my self concept is and work that I continue to do is by working with my therapist. The second one is feedback from others. And I say this with a grain of salt because this is feedback that you request, not feedback that's obviously given to you unsolicited. So we can really get a lot of insight into what our self concept is by asking feedback from people that we trust. So it could be your friends, it could be family members, or even a therapist or your life coach, just to get some feedback. And their perspectives can really help you identify what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and especially your blind spots. This is actually most of the work that I do in coaching is to help my clients identify their blind spots. So when you have that feedback, you can really see where your blind spots are. I have been so fortunate that the closest relationships that I've had, my most intimate friendships, have been very reciprocal as far as feedback, and I don't take that for granted. My closest friends, like most of the women that I have had the pleasure of just being super close to in my lifetime, have always been able to just like, even when I was a young girl, like, moms who mentored me, my own parents, like people who were able to communicate with me. I've been so blessed that they gave me feedback that was very loving, but also like very corrective. And I recently was talking, I think I mentioned it here on the podcast, where I had a conversation with my best friend, and she just like pointed some things that like she had noticed in our relationship, and it was from a very loving place and also a very corrective place. And a year ago, when I went through some crazy changes in some friendships that I had, one of the things is I asked one of my closest friends to like be my mirror and to call me out if like something that was related to how like I showed up in those friendships appeared in the now. Like I just kind of give her like a free permission slip to be like, hey, you're doing the thing, right? And so having that feedback, right, has helped me really hone my strengths and also like spend time with my weaknesses, identify why they're even there, and see my blind spots. The third way is through your behavior. So your behavior can give you some clues about your self-concept. So for example, if you're always putting yourself down or you're always avoiding challenging situation, it can be an indication of maybe a negative self-concept. Like you have a belief that you're not able to achieve certain things, and that becomes a limiting belief, which then becomes like an assumption that you have, and that's how like you carry it along in the world. Number 4 is our beliefs. And I have mentioned here before, and I will repeat it again. Our beliefs are thoughts that we continue to think over and over again until they stick, right? So these beliefs about ourselves can really help us identify our self-concept. So you might have a belief like, I'm smart or I'm not good enough, and that can shape your self-concept. I think about the fact like when I was little, my grandparents were like, my hype squad. Like they were literally like, you are so smart, you were so smart, like you're gonna be successful, and like truly hyped me up. So I didn't have space in my life to think that there was anything less than me being smart, right? So when I didn't do well in like school, like, and which was very rare, but if I didn't like do great on a test, I didn't start thinking like I'm dumb. I was just like, something's wrong, I have to fix it because I'm smart and I know the answers and I can figure it out. And so they helped shape that self-concept because they helped me believe that I was smart. But another like also opposite belief is that when I was little, I just didn't think I was pretty. And so I spent a lot of my childhood just like thinking I wasn't pretty. And when I got older and I would be in relationships and people would tell me nice things about me, I would just be like, yeah, you're full of it. I don't believe you. And that was work that I needed to do to like identify my self concept in a way that my self confidence and my love of myself grew. And it didn't matter what other people in the world thought. Like now I'm like, I like me, right? Your like is extra. And I think highly of myself in a very like humble and self respecting way. But I think highly of myself such that if somebody tried to say something that is intended to put me down, it really wouldn't land because I just know how I feel about myself. So I don't necessarily depend on outside feedback to like remind me of my self-worth. The fifth thing is our emotions. One of the things that I do on a lot of my consultations call is ask my potential client, what is the predominant emotion you feel on a regular basis? And that gives me an idea of what their self-concept is, because it then reflects the thoughts that they think on a regular basis, which then gives me an idea of like the work we will spend doing for 6 months in one-on-one coaching that will help them identify their self-concept and work on that. So, for example, if you have a healthy self-concept and the predominant emotion you feel is confident, right? Then it indicates that you're driven to like develop that self-concept. On the other hand, if the predominant emotion you feel is shame, then that may be reflective of a negative self-concept. So, if we can at least identify our self-concept, what do we think about myself? What is the space that I occupy in the world? How do I even understand myself? So, as a working mom, your self concept can be influenced by a lot of factors. And I wanted to kind of like bring this up, including work life balance, your career aspirations, what society expects of you. And so, here are some ways in which your self concept can be affected, right? So, one is your identity. As a working mom, you may struggle with your identity as a parent, a partner, a professional, right? Which can create self doubt and uncertainty about your abilities to kind of juggle those balls very well. Number two is guilt. I mean, this is like a significant emotion that working moms experience because they're caught in the tug of war between spending time with their children or creating an income and a lifestyle for their children. And sometimes women will feel like they're not doing enough with their children, which can lead to negative self talk and feelings of inadequacy. Number three is career aspirations. So, as a working mom, you may have goals for your career and the things that you want to achieve, but you may feel conflicted about pursuing them while you're also being a mom. So, that then causes you to maybe question your priorities and feel torn between your work and family responsibilities, which then like helps shape your self-concept. Like, am I a mom? Am I an employee? Like, what am I? Number four is societal expectations. Society can be really unrealistic in the expectations that working moms do it all. And I remember recently reading an article, and I think it was the first CEO. She's the first African American CEO, and I believe it was HP, but I'm not really sure what company. And she was just like, I don't do it all. And the comments on that article were so enlightening to me because, on one hand, women are told to lean in and use all the resources in the workplace and do the things, and also be a like fully present mom. And she was just talking about how like she had outsourced some of like childcare, and her husband would do like drop off and pick up. And to me, like when society is placing this expectation, then the self concept is influenced because there's feelings of pressure, stress, and overwhelm to the working mom. Last but not least is what I like to call work life counterbalance, right? Counterbalancing work and family responsibilities can be challenging. And as a working mom, you may struggle to find time for self care, for your hobbies, your personal interests, which then kind of also would create burnout, but also impact your self concept and what you think about yourself. So, it's important for you as a working mom to really recognize the potential impact that these five factors have on your self-concept and work towards like really solidifying and understanding your self-concept so that you can show up as the version that you believe you are, right? And I'm going to teach you some ways in which you can kind of, do that, and also the things that impact our self-concept and why I wanted to bring up self-sabotage. So some of the ways, you can really look into that is practicing self-compassion. I know I say it's the thing I will say all the time, right? Practicing self-compassion, meaning self-kindness, understanding common humanity, and mindfulness. Number two is seeking support, whether it's from family or friends or groups, and prioritizing self-care. So this is why, again, my mission behind the Smart Mama Club was to create community so that we can practice self-compassion, but also, connect and co-regulate with each other, because we need to have that resource for us to be able to like support each other and identify the challenges that we face as working moms to create more supportive and inclusive, workplaces and policies, but only if we understand what we actually do deserve and what we do need. So let's talk about a little bit about self-sabotage. So self-sabotage is any behavior, thought, or action that holds you back from achieving your goal. and it also holds you back from living your full potential and living a fulfilling life. So it's really acting against your self-interest, often because of an unconscious belief, fear, or past experiences. So it can take different forms, and I'm going to talk about 5 of them real quick and just kind of see if any of this kind of can lands with you. So one is procrastination, right? Delaying or avoiding things that you know are necessary for your own growth and success, and delaying making decisions that may propel you forward and move the needle in your life. 2 is negative self-talk. I think this is probably one of the biggest ones. The next one is, I believe, what the biggest one is. Negative self-talk is just like criticizing ourselves or talking ourselves out of action because we are doubtful of our capacity and ability, or from fear of failing. 3 is perfectionism, right? We set these unrealistic expectations for ourselves, and then when it's time to actually do the thing, we get paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes because we want it to be perfect, we want it to be pretty, and with a bow on top of it, and if it isn't, then it's not good enough. 4 is self-medicating or numbing, using substances or behaviors like overeating to cope with negative emotions or stress, or alcohol, drugs, which can then create more problems. Last but not least is sabotaging relationships through self-destructive behaviors. A wide range of it. It could be sabotaging your friendships, sabotaging your marriage, and it could go from, picking fights with friends and family, your partner, to infidelity, or, betraying the trust of a friend because of your fear of intimacy or vulnerability. And self-sabotage can have very serious consequences on our mental health, our relationships, and our overall well-being, because it can create emotions of frustration, guilt, and shame, which prevent us from actually living through our full self-concept. So if you identify any of these self-sabotaging behaviors, it's important to just kind of give yourself grace, right? Nothing's gone wrong. You're not broken, but work towards achieving the goals that you've set to live your life, and maybe ask for support. Get the support of a therapist or a coach. Start to understand how to practice self-compassion and how to develop a growth mindset. So, what are some examples of how moms self-sabotage? And again, these can be unique, but I'm going to kind of give you 5 of them in which we specifically as moms may be self-sabotage. Number 1 is neglecting self-care. So many of us moms will prioritize our children's needs over our own and often neglect our self-care needs, which can create an environment of burnout, exhaustion, and a lack of energy to pursue our personal goals or interests. And I always think, like, even though we know you put on the oxygen mask on yourself, moms tend to put the oxygen mask on their kids before they put it on themselves. And that doesn't end up serving us in the long run, because what it creates, again, with the burnout is eventually it creates resentment for making all these plans and putting your kids in all these activities and bending yourself over backwards and, twisting yourself into a pretzel to make your children's lives better, and literally setting yourself on fire to keep everybody warm. So neglecting self-care is definitely a primary form of self-sabotage. Number 2, which I could go on all day about this, is comparison. So social media and society, like we talked about, it sets these unrealistic expectations for moms, which can lead to us like thinking that we're not good enough, or we're not meeting the standard, or we're not fitting the mold, which creates emotions of inadequacy and self-doubt. When we compare to ourselves to, again, a highlight reel on the internet, we think that those moms or women are doing better, and we feel like we're falling short. 3, again, is perfectionism. Talked about it in the overall factors, but we may feel pressure to be the perfect mom, the perfect spouse, the perfect employee, and we end up setting unrealistic expectations for ourselves and feeling like we're failing when we can't meet those expectations. Guilt, again, comes in. We feel guilty for, taking time for ourselves, pursuing our goals, and we may think we're neglecting our children or our families if we prioritize our needs. The fear of judgment, I think, is the most significant one, in which we worry so much about being judged by others, including our own family and society, for the parenting choices or career goals that we make, which creates an environment, again, of self-doubt, and we lack confidence in pursuing our goals. I will say, one of the things that I had to really work on with my identity as a mom, a working mom, is are these decisions for the best outcome for my family, right? And does my family, which is my husband and my daughter, do they support this decision? Otherwise, everybody else's opinion is background noise. And when I feel tempted to outsource my decision making to the people in the nosebleed seats, I just remember I'm the one in the arena getting my butt kicked, right? I'm the one doing the work down here, trying to navigate being a working mom, trying to navigate, being a parent, a sister, a wife, a daughter, all the things. And so, unless you're in the arena getting your ass kicked, I don't want your opinion. I mean, thank you for it, but I really don't. So, working through those fears of judgment can be so, so, so impactful for you. So if you notice that any of these, are showing up in your life, I just want you to think about it and just make a decision. How do you want to move forward? How do you want to live the rest of your life? And how can you move on from there? So I'm going to talk about some ways in which we can prevent or overcome self-sabotage if we find ourselves in that pattern. And the first step obviously involves being aware of the behaviors and the thoughts that may be holding you back and then taking actions to overcome them. So first, we really step into the thoughts, right? We get into the practice of self-awareness. Start noticing the thoughts that you think about yourself, the thoughts that you think about your life, yourself as a working mom. And if you think a thought that is like, oh, I should try harder, really the thought is, I'm not trying hard enough. Or I wish I was a good mom or a better mom. What really the thought is I'm not good enough. So kind of identify that. Stay in self-awareness. Notice your thoughts about yourself. Notice your thoughts about what you think your life should be. And then notice the emotions that those thoughts create, because those emotions then create the behaviors and actions that may be contributing to your self-sabotage. So how you can do this is by journaling, meditating, again, asking for feedback from people you value and you trust, and really gain insight into your patterns. In the Smart Mama Club this month, in April, we are spending time working on the foundations of mindset work. And one of the things that I truly think is important is for us to know the impact of our beliefs, our assumptions, our thoughts about a certain situation are what creates our emotions and our feelings. And with those emotions and feelings, we then do things that either, again, move us forward, which is further our self-concept, or pull us back, which is self-sabotage. And then the result of our life is as a net result of the thoughts that we think over and over and over, which create those beliefs. So whatever your belief is, right, will always often create the result that you either desire or don't. So if you have this belief that I'm not a good mom, the result that you will create is actually you creating more evidence for why you're not being a good mom. So pay attention to that. Practice that self-awareness and just notice what your brain is offering you. Number 2 is being willing to challenge negative beliefs. So identify those limiting thoughts, those thought errors, right? And notice any negative beliefs you have about yourself and be willing to challenge them by finding evidence of the contrary, right? So if you're like, I'm not a good mom, I want you to come up with 5 reasons why you're a good mom, right? If you think I'm not good enough, I want you to think of 5 things like, why are you good enough, right? Even if it's like, I'm not smart enough, come up with 5 reasons why you are smart enough. And the more you do that, the more you challenge your brain. I always want you to remember your brain is wired for negative, right? So it's always finding negative evidence in the world. So just a random segue. I was talking to an anesthesiologist I was working with recently, and she came in the room as I was inducing my patient, and she said to the patient, those of you who are in anesthesia will understand this. So she says to my patient, okay, the medicine going in your IV is going to burn. And so she, and I'm injecting the medicine, by the way, which is a phrase I never use. I never say burn to the patient. I'll tell you why in a second. And she says, it's going to burn. And the propofol hadn't even gone in. I was pushing. So it was the initial saline in the tubing. The patient was like, ah. And I looked at my anesthesiologist and I was like, hey, I never use that phrase to tell my patients when they're going to sleep. And so once the patient was asleep, I said to her, I was doing like a bunch of cases back and forth, and I said, I have mixed this mix like probably, especially now that I'm like, more independent in practice. Over the last year, I have done this, and in my career in anesthesia, my first year, I stopped using the phrase propofol is going to burn because I didn't even think about it now, but now I know exactly why it's important for me not to say that. I said, when you tell your patient to expect something, the brain immediately starts scanning the environment for the very thing that you told them was going to happen. So the phrase that I use, and it might not be popular to you, I just like it, my patients like it, is you're going to feel some sunshine in your arm. And for those of us in, South Texas, sunshine is pretty warm, right? But I'm not describing it as a horrible burning sensation so that the patient's brain scans the environment for that. So just like for me, believing that the brain really does look for negative bias, and this propofol example is just something that I truly see, that if I offer you to find a negative in the environment, now I'm not saying there won't be discomfort in the arm when the patient's going to sleep, but they're not thinking to find that burning sensation. So that's just something I think to myself, like, if I wake up in the morning and I think today is going to be a horrible day, I will find something in my day that's going to turn my day into awful, right? So if at the very least, if I can't find a positive belief for the day or a positive thought for a day, I'm just going to be neutral about it. I'm not going to give my brain ammunition to go scan the environment to find things that are going to create a negative experience for me today. So really practice positive self-talk. When you find yourself having these conversations with yourself that are very self-deprecating and self-diminishing, just pause and ask yourself, like, why do I choose to think that about myself? Like, what is the genesis of this thought? Like, is it even true? Like, how did I come up with this thought about myself? Number 3 is set realistic goals, right? Set goals that are realistic to you, not to other people. But then take those goals and break them down into smaller, manageable steps so that you don't feel overwhelmed and discouraged. Number 4 is really work on developing a growth mindset by embracing challenges and viewing mistakes as an opportunity for you to grow and learning rather than thinking of it as a failure. Number 5, which to me is the most important, is practice self-compassion. Being kind to yourself and understanding towards yourself when you experience setbacks or make mistakes. So avoid self-criticizing and focusing and really focusing on what went wrong, and instead focus on learning from the experience. 6 is seeking support. Seek support from trusted friends, family, professionals, such as a therapist or a life coach, to help you overcome these self-sabotaging behaviors. These behaviors are literally like roadblocks that you put in your own path. And if you have somebody that shows you those blind spots where you realize that you are the one that creates those roadblocks, then it can be very eye-opening and it can give you a point to work on. Last but not least is prioritizing self-care. Taking care of yourself by getting enough rest, eating well, drinking your water, and engaging in activities that bring you joy and relaxation. This will then give you the energy that you need to pursue your goals and to really show up as the version that you want to be showing up in the world. So these are just some strategies that you can use to prevent self-sabotage and work towards achieving your goals and living a fulfilling life as a working mom. But remember that this is a process and it might take time, but if you continue to do it, it's just like bathing. We do it every day, right? So keep doing it every day. You can then develop a positive self-concept and reach your full potential. So what I want you to think about is just understanding the value of, if anything you're going to take out of this, the value of being mindful and practicing self-compassion is so important in overcoming self-sabotage, because even when you do self-sabotage, you're kind to yourself and you reset the equation. You bring yourself back to baseline and you make decisions that move you forward and move the needle forward in your life. So I hope that this kind of breaks down what your self-concept is and how to really identify it, and also what self-sabotage is and how to prevent it, and also how to eliminate it if you're finding yourself getting in your own way If you're constantly stepping in front of yourself and tripping yourself, then it's important that you reflect on that and you make decisions that move you forward and get you to the life that you want to live. That's all I have for you today. Again, I am so glad that you get to listen. I want to thank you for contributing to the fact that our podcast, it is all of ours podcast, has reached 30,000 downloads, which means the world to me. So keep sharing it, keep leaving your reviews. They mean the world to me and my team. And just keep supporting us. And as you know, if there's anything I can do to support you, just email me, hello@stethoscopestoswaddles.com. I'm here to support you. If there are topics that you want to hear on the podcast that I haven't covered, please email me. I'm happy to research them and bring them to you and distill them in a way that makes sense. And if you have not looked into the Smart Mama Club, I want to ask you to just take a look, see what's in there. Join us. It's going to be fun. We are building community. We are creating a space for self-compassion and self-awareness and self-care. And so I want to invite you in. The doors are open. Our soft launch is this month, and I'm glad to just be able to create this space and container for all of us. So any questions about that too, you can send me an email. I'm happy to answer them. Have a great, great, great week. I am so grateful for your time and for tuning in and for your support. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. All right, bye now. I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you've been listening to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. New episodes are out every Monday. These episodes are created by me, Shira Bergbauer, and produced by Cassidy Mitchell. If you enjoyed this show or found it helpful, please rate it and review us on Apple Podcasts. If the concepts I share on this podcast resonate with you, or you're ready to change your relationships and mindset, I can help you. If you'd like in-depth, personalized support, I'd love to invite you to apply for my Life and Mindset coaching program. Just imagine you and I every week working together as I teach you the tools to up-level your life. To book your free 1-hour consultation call, go to www.stethoscopestoswaddles.com/consultation. You're doing a great job, Mama. Have a great week. Bye now.